I was driving by myself, going the speed limit on the freeway, and out of nowhere, a cop pulls me over, siren, goes on, I pull over. I know I didn't do anything wrong, but I automatically feel like guilty, like I did something wrong. I'm going to go to jail. I don't know what's wrong. And then he says, "Do you know why you were pulled over?" And I said, "No." And then he says, "What's that sticker on your bumper?" And I said, "What?" He's like, What's your bumper sticker?" And my bumper sticker was a flag of the Philippines. And I said, it's a flag from my country, a flag from the country that my parents were born in. And he said, "Are you in some sort of gang?" And I said, "No, it's my parents' country and just trying to show some pride." And then he said, "Well, I suggest you take off that sticker if you don't want to get in trouble anymore." I drove off. I drove home and I don't think I even told anyone. I just kind of sat with it for a little bit. And then I thought, is this bumper sticker worth me keeping on if I'm going to get pulled over and if that's a trend? Even though I know that logically having a bumper sticker of a country that your family is from is harmless, is that worth being stopped for all the time? So I made the decision to take the bumper sticker off. It's interesting, though, because it's something I don't think about very often, yet it's something that, if asked, I could tell you it, and it's something that's still painful because it was probably not dealt with as well, right? Versus as an adult, you go through something, hopefully people are able to process it and talk with their partners or friends about things in depth. But I think those childhood things are so painful because they weren't dealt with, at least not in that moment, not talking about it, internalizing it, feeling like somehow it was my fault. That was how I coped. And as a result, I didn't really fully heal from one of those situations. And it just helps me to understand too that when I experience things that are racist or racially charged today, it really is just a trigger to every single past racial experience I've had. And so it's not just about that one moment in a faculty meeting where somebody says something racist or, that one moment where someone on the street mistreats me in some way, and I know it's related to race. It's the accumulation of all of that that is the trauma, and I'm just being re-triggered by this trauma over and over and over again. I think my coping has changed over the years in a lot of different ways. I think one, I'm more open to talking about my feelings with people, and that took time. I think as a man, and particularly as an Asian American man or Filipino American man, we're taught so much to, hold our emotions, to not share our emotions, to not show weakness, not show vulnerability. So back then, and as a child, as a teenager, I tried to do that. The problem is that I was a very emotional person and still am a very emotional person. And so to have to keep up with that just seemed so viscerally impossible for me to do. But now I try to use all of my support networks and people to talk with and process and unpack anytime a situation happens. I don't think any racial microaggression or microaggression of any sort goes by in my life that I would not at least tell one person about, because I know that it's a way for me to address it, to heal, to move forward. I find myself when I don't address something that I tend to perseverate and to think about it over and over again, to the point where it probably disturbs my functioning in ways. And so I try to talk about it, to try to unpack it. The other piece of my coping is I try not to internalize things. I think the thing with these experiences with racism and other microaggressions are that you somehow feel like it's all your fault. It goes back to childhood, where I feel like I somehow learned I should just be happy to be here. I'm just be happy that I'm even allowed to be in this country, to be expected to not be part of the norm, to know that racism, explicit or implicit or casual, is just going to be part of my experience. And so somehow I'm to blame, or I need to not be so sensitive to these experiences when they happen. It's so easy for people of color and people of other marginalized groups to blame themselves, to feel like it's their fault, to feel like they did something to contribute to this microaggression in some way. And that's like a normal response. I mean, that's the message we've received all of our lives, that somehow things are our faults, or somehow we're not as strong enough, or that we're not as resilient enough, or that we are just too sensitive. Why are we even paying attention to these instances of racism and so forth? But what I do now is I externalize. So when something racial happens, I make sure to say to myself, like, that has nothing to do with me. That has everything to do with them. That's their racism. That's their inability to recognize their privilege. That's their inability to recognize the dynamic of what's happening right now that has nothing to do with me. And I think having people who have modeled that for me has been really helpful. I've learned this a lot from my Black female friends who have taught me that. And it's been so effective, because the second you not just like pretend it has nothing to do with me, but the second you label it like, no, that has nothing to do with me, that is just racist behavior, that's all on them. And then remove any sort of blame from yourself. If there is blame, sometimes there might be blame. You might say like, well, I take responsibility for how I did this. You take responsibility to that, so you're not completely a defensive person. But when you know that something that happened is just completely someone else's own stuff, that just becomes so freeing.